This video is brought to you by MoviePalette.com and enter ROOM15 for 15% off of your palette. Hey horror fans, welcome back to 1237, back with another review. As I continue my run through of films based on real life serial killers, and this is another one that I have not done yet, or the kind that I have not done yet. I've done a killer from the 1920s, I've done 2 films from a killer overseas, but I have not touched upon what's known as the buddy serial killer. And even though I have reviewed Henry Portrait of a Serial Killer, which depicts a fictional week in the spree of Henry Lee Lucas and Otis Toole, those two were still notorious killers in their own right, even though they did team up for a while. But as far as, two people teaming up and committing a whole spree together, I think these two are the most notorious, although one of them would go on to kill 2 more people afterward. But the whole spree committed by these 2 buddies. And it's different than, like, married couples. Like, buddy killers would be different than, say, Fred and Rosemary West, or Ian Brady and Myra Hindley, or Paul Bernardo and Carla Homolka. They're different than married couples. These can be friends or family members that, you have the dominant one, you have the follower, that just like to kill together. And I would say these two are probably the most notorious. I would say they're probably more notorious than, say, the DC Sniper, or, well, there's actually 3 separate people called the Freeway Killer, but it is the Hillside Stranglers, and this is the 2004 film, The Hillside Strangler. Now, the title is in the singular form because during the investigation they thought it was one person. Now, this is not the first film to be based on them. There was, of course, a made-for-TV movie in the 80s. There's one called Rampage, The Hillside Strangler. That one I have not seen. I also haven't seen the TV movie, but I'm pretty sure Rampage is pretty fictionalized, and I'm not sure if the TV movie even has the same names. It's actually The Case of the Hillside Strangler. If the TV movie is more accurate than this, I will be surprised, because I was actually impressed by this film. It's put out by Tartan Video, and I know they have a handful of good titles. I wasn't expecting a Uwe Lamel film. I knew it was going to be better than that. But as far as accuracy or approach, I thought it was going to be that lackluster. Despite the cast, I figured it was going to be, that inaccurate. Oh, let's just capitalize off it. Or let's just slap Hillside Strangler on it. It's actually a well-made, well-acted account of these 2 guys. And, the 2 guys played them well, which I'll get into. It does leave a lot out. Some stuff I was actually pretty surprised at what it left out. I guess in a way I kind of understand it, because one of them is kind of a high-profile fact. But it's a pretty faithful telling, which, when you look at who made it, I mean, according to the cover, from the makers of Ed Gein and Ted Bundy, it's directed by Chuck Perrello, who I thought he directed the Dahmer movie. Maybe he did direct. I'm going to have to check it now. Actually, I can't click on his name. I know it has the same producers, Hamish McAlpine and Michael Muskell, as the 2002 Ted Bundy film. Has one of the same writers, Stephen Johnston, and Chuck Perrello wrote this. Stephen Johnston and Matthew Bright wrote this. Bright directed this. Which, I think Perrello directed the Dahmer film, and Steve Johnston directed the Ed Gein film, or vice versa. And, it's kind of in that realm of accuracy, where it kind of gets all the bullet point things right. If they're tweaked, it's just names or how some of the events unfolded. but I was still pretty impressed by it. So yeah, directed by Chuck Perrello, written by Steven Johnston, music by Danny Saber. There's not much on this film, really, but uh, well, first the two Hillside Stranglers was Kenneth Bianchi and Angelo Buono. We have C. Thomas Howell, of course, Pony Boy, uh, Jim Halsey from The Hitcher, the Boston Ripper or Reaper. I always forget. I think he's one of the best villains in Criminal Minds. Loved him in The Hitcher. He's good in The Outsiders. I've always liked C. Thomas Howell. And Nicholas Turturro as Angelo Buono, which I've seen him in other stuff, like back when I used to watch Adam Sandler. Sad to admit, I know he was in The Longest Yard. I'll get into the casting, but they played their parts well. We also have Roz Witt. Oh, that's yeah. We have an appearance by Lynn Shay as Buono's mom. Uh, Jennifer Tisdale as one of the women that they first abduct. I believe she was in. Yeah, she was in Ted Bundy. After his. She was the one that Ted follows from the bar to Chi Omega in this film. I think there's actually a few people from Ted Bundy in this one. Mostly actresses. But yeah, there's really not much about this film for me to mention as far as behind the scenes. Also, Marisol Padilla Sanchez. Uh, it doesn't even say who plays his girlfriend. Wow. Which I'm guessing. Oh, Allison Lang plays Carol, which in real life her name was Kelly Boyd, Kenneth Bianchi's girlfriend. Now, what I want to say about these two is, and later on when I give my brief clip notes, you'll see a picture of the real Hillside Stranglers. But now, uh, I actually think that Howell, who plays Bianchi, looks more like Buono, and Turturro looks more like Bianchi. And also, Buono was the older cousin between the two, and C. Thomas Howell looks much older than Turturro. In fact, there's even dialogue where Turturro talks about, oh, I remember when you were this young, and oh, I grew up. But Howell does look older than Nicholas Turturro. Plus, Turturro has a more round face that Bianchi had. Now, sure, the mustache does help Howell look more like Bianchi, which also, in real life, Bianchi was more of the submissive one. He was more. He was known to get more emotional, where Buono was the, natural born rapist, I should say. Sort of the driving force, I guess. Which, and that's how they have to play him. I mean, Nicholas Turturro, he's playing it kind of like a Joe Pesci role. Like the fast-talking, angry, easy to get riled up, angry Italian. And C. Thomas Howell, he's kind of, he grows to love being a Hillside Strangler, eventually needing it in his life. But as far as looks, I would say that they look like they're opposite. But performance-wise, they do play the one that they are playing very well. So aside from that, it's a pretty accurate film. It does leave out stuff like how they almost abducted the daughter of actor Peter Lorre, Golden Age classic actor Peter Lorre. Fritz Lang's M, he was the killer in M. He's all kinds of films. Eventually did films with Karloff and Vincent Price for Roger Corman. It does not go into detail of Buono's pre-Hillside Strangler crimes, probably for the better, because it involved a lot of stuff with kids, even his own, which I've read enough and listened to enough podcasts, seen enough documentaries to know that, yeah, Buono was a sick person. So I like how they just kind of narrowed it down to the Hillside Strangler case. If you want to know more about Angelo Buono's past, I guess you could also just pick up a book or a documentary, which there are Hillside Strangler documentaries. I know there's one on Peacock. I think it's called Devil in Disguise. That might be exclusively Bianchi. And just as always, numerous documentaries I have. The about 24 or so encyclopedic books that I have. But ones that I haven't pulled because they actually have chapters in this one is these are among some like the 24 books I have, but this has a chapter on sadistic stranglers. There's like American serial killers. They're part of the 70s chapter, and then World's Worst Crimes, which actually one of them has sadistic stranglers, and the other one has a chapter on buddy killers. Why do I stutter so bad at night? So there's more about them in these books than some of the other ones I have, but yeah, I have probably almost 30 books like this and those two big ones. Now the style of the film, it's more stylish than, I would say Dahmer and Ted Bundy are more straightforward. This has a way of showing the crimes. Like, at one point there is a montage where it shows them with different victims and how they're torturing and killing them, put over like TV and radio news audio about another body found, another victim linked to the Hillside Stranglers. So I like how the montage is done. It does kind of skip from like the second or third victim to like the next to last with that montage. But also like when they're sitting in the car talking to each other about their crimes, you'll kind of get like this split screen with kind of a fade in the middle with like slow motion of their crimes as they're talking about it. Some scenes like when Bianchi is talking to his girlfriend, you'll have the audio of the conversation, but there'll be like the video with no audio of like their previous kill. Probably as he's talking about how I can't remember if this scene is how he'll be a good father or a story of why he's missing work. So it is a tad stylized, but it's well acted by everybody. Even the lesser known people. It's always cool to see Lin Shaye. She has a brief role, but she definitely makes the most of it. Does it feel 1970s? Because it takes place essentially between 4 months. Fall of 77 and early 78. I mean, they do a good job with like the clothes and the interior design, the set designs. It looks like the 70s. Very few scenes like with cars, so you can definitely tell it's a low budget film trying to really evoke the 70s, but it's not like there's a soundtrack. You don't get like Foghat or a lot of like 70s. It's not like a Rob Zombie film that tries to shove the 70s in your face, which might have actually helped it. Because some of the serial killer films I've seen, ones that really immerse you in that kind of atmosphere, can be some of the most effective. But overall, it is pretty accurate. It is well acted. It's well shot. It's very well shot, especially for a low budget independent film. I would say this one is probably well, if we link all of them together, let's say Ed Gein, Ted Bundy, this, and I guess Dahmer, because I'm pretty sure Chuck Perrello directed Dahmer. This one might be the most stylish. I don't know about the most accurate. That might be Dahmer, but this one's definitely the most. Well, I was gonna say the most grisly, but that might also be this one. This one has no investigation in it. I mean, this is one of those movies where if you just want to see the killers doing their thing, then this is it. There's no, you know, there's like no, literally no scenes of police at the station talking about, how another body was found, or there's no leads or whatever. And it can get pretty graphic. I mean, it does have its rape scenes, its brief torture scenes. You do get shots of how the bodies were found, where and how they were found. They were called. There's body keepers, posers, and dumpers. These guys were dumpers. So yeah, this is definitely one of those. I would hate to call this a surface level film because it is well made and it is fairly accurate, but it really does just focus on how these two came to come to this conclusion of what to do and their crimes. Nothing about the investigation or backstory or really anything. But even a lot of the side stuff, it pays a fair amount of detail to, like the personal life, specifically Bianchi. Bianchi is kind of the star of the film, which, I mean, even in like serial killer uh, literature and history, he's kind of been the star of the show, even though Buono was kind of the more a dominant one. So yeah, if you were more this Ted Bundy movie than say Extremely Wicked because you just want to see the killer commit their crimes, then this is one for you. So now before I get too far into the plot, just as always, just kind of a brief uh, cliff notes or brief synopsis about these two guys. The Hillside Stranglers were cousins of Angelo Buono, who was born October 5th, 1934, died September 21st, 2002, and Kenneth Bianchi, May 22nd, 1951. They ran a 4-month rampage between October of 77 and February of 78, where they killed 10 women, mostly prostitutes. They would pretend to be modeling agents or police to get women to go along with them. And then after they would be abducted, they would torture, rape, and then strangle their victims. In 1978, Bianchi moved to Washington to be with his son and girlfriend, which there he killed 2 more women. And in 1979, they were both arrested and charged, leading to one of the most expensive trials in Washington. Kenneth Bianchi tried many different defenses, such as insanity and dissociative personalities, but ultimately and eventually, and really to save himself, he turned on his cousin Angelo Buono. They were both sentenced in 1983, and they are among the most notorious of the Bundy serial killers. And so now we come to the film, which, and there is way more to it than that. Some of those cliff notes I tend to go on quite a bit, so I really just wanted to give just the barest for this one. So it opens up in a clothing store with Bianchi as he watches women change through an air duct and then pretends to be an officer, accusing this woman of stealing, having to take her away. We never see this scene again, and I don't think they ever went quite that far, but they did. Posing as police was sort of their main MO. They would often bring them back to Buono's car shop. So it shows Bianchi living in Rochester, New York, and he gets a rejection letter from a police academy, which is true. Bianchi really wanted to be a police officer, and he got rejected from a number of police academies. He kind of had a mental breakdown, and so that was when he decided to move to Los Angeles to live with his cousin. They're not blood cousins. Bianchi was adopted. So he moves down to LA, or the Glendale area, which it also shows him applying to police academies in Glendale and LA. Gets rejected to both, which is true. It does show Bianchi getting bogus psychology and therapists uh, degrees or diplomas to frame and hang up, and those flyers with the pull tabs. So he can feign being a psychologist or a sex therapist. It was one of his scams to make money. That was true. Shows Bianchi first getting a girlfriend when he moves into this place. I don't remember how they met, but in the film she goes by Claire. In real life her name was Kelly Boyd. But the film does show her getting pregnant and threatening to leave several times. At one point, he even tells her that his doctor found cancer, which he did tell her. He was a pathological liar. You know, a lot of their dialogue scenes after a certain point is about how he misses so much work and eventually loses his job. That's what leads into the, oh, my doctor found cancer. He was actually missing time because he was always hanging out with Angela Buono. And the movie makes it sound like he got fired for lost time, where in real life I think he was fired because they found pot in his desk. It shows Angela Buono having an auto upholstery shop, which was true. Though I think he had a separate shop. The movie makes it look like he's doing it out of his garage. It shows them both having the discussion of starting getting into the whore business. They realize that escort girls make all kinds of money, so they decide that's what they're gonna do. It shows that it was Angelo's idea, which it was. He proposed it to Kenneth. And so it shows them abducting these two girls. Now, one is a girl on vacation from Tucson. This is the one that was one of the Chi Omega girls in Ted Bundy. Bianchi approaches her as a talent agent. They end up essentially holding her prisoner, and then one of her friends flies out, and then they abduct her. And they essentially hold these two girls prisoner and hoard them out. Now, this did happen in real life. Well, in the film they're called April and Emma, but in real life it was Sabra Hannon and Becky Spears. They want to get a list of all these men that frequent prostitutes. So they get this one prostitute named Gabrielle to give them a list. Turns out that the list is fake or bogus. Now the movie depicts, so Gabrielle gives them a list, so they get all these Johns coming over for April and Emma. But then these pimps show up, beat them up, steal their money, and let April and Emma go. In real life, I don't think that happened. What did happen was they found out that the list was bogus. But one of the two girls somehow came across a lawyer, and he knew their situation, and he helped them escape. So they did escape. So in retaliation for the bad list, because it's not that the list was bad, but she gave him a list of all their Johns, like her pimp's Johns, so that's why they retaliated. So they decide to get revenge on Gabrielle. They pick her up, and she's killed in the back seat of one of their cars. It's Angela Buono that's driving, and Bianchi's the one that's strangling her in the back seat. Now that is true. Factually, it was Bianchi's car, and in real life, it was Deborah Noble and Yolanda Washington that provided the bad list. They wanted to go after Noble, but they couldn't find her, so that's when they went after Yolanda Washington, and she became their first victim on October 17th of 1977. Then it shows that their second victim, which is another prostitute, was on Halloween, which it was Halloween in real life. And now it was a 15-year-old prostitute in real life, but she's portrayed as older in this. They bring her back to Angelo's house where they decide to kill her, but in real life, they brought her back to his car shop. And they dumped her body in a residential area where a neighbor saw the body, which is true. And then it shows the third victim, which was not a sex worker. She was actually a dancer, but in this, on her way home from work. But in the film, she says she was on her way home from the hospital. I don't know if she said visiting or working. But her name was Lissa Caston, and she was killed November 6th of 77. So far, it's pretty fairly true. The only thing that was really exaggerated might have been the whole pimp retaliation for the list thing. So then that's when Bianchi tells his girlfriend that he has cancer, which was true. And then we get sort of this montage of them with different victims and audio of news and radio about the Hillside Stranglers. We do catch a glimpse of them holding a girl. The other one has a syringe with blue fluid. There was at least one victim where they did inject straight Windex into their victim, which was Christina Weckler, their sixth victim. They were just trying all kinds of different things. At one point, yeah, even putting a bag over one's head with a vacuum in it to suck the air out. We catch a brief glimpse of that. So then... Oh, it also says 50 officers are on the case. Initially, in real life, it was 30. Now, I know these films are never going to be 100% accurate, but and I'm not faulting it for things it gets wrong. I'm just saying what was different. So then we see it's around Christmas time, and they order a call girl to an apartment. In real life, they thought that would be easier. But, so they kill her in the apartment, dump her elsewhere. But when her agency notices that she hasn't returned, they call cops to the apartment where she was sent to, but it was already vacated. And that was on December 14th of 77. So then we get the scene of Angelo's mother, Lynn Shay, her funeral, which was in January of 78. Then it shows their 10th and final victim, and this is pretty close to real life. Because in the film, I don't remember what they say her name is, but she pulls up to Angelo's house or a car shop, and it seems like they know each other. He asks who she is, and she says, "Oh, you don't recognize me without my waitress clothes," implying that she's a waitress, which is true. And so then he looks at her new car, which is a Datsun. He talks to her about floor mat upholstery, so they go inside to look at some samples. That's when Bianchi comes in, and that's when Buono starts to strangle her. In real life, that was pretty true. She had gone to his house. They were talking about upholstery options. But when Bianchi walked in and saw them having that conversation, the two of them separated for a private conversation, and that's when they discussed making her their next victim. Now, this would be the last victim that they killed together as the Hillside Stranglers. It does show that the police talking to Bianchi, sort of a... I don't remember how stringent it was in real life. The film makes it seem like, oh, how long are you in LA? People say you have a fake badge. Angelo gets so pissed that he threatens to kill him if he ever sees him again. That was true. So he moves up to Washington. Oh, and the last victim was Sidney Hudspeth on February 16th of 78. So he moves up to Washington to be with Claire and the baby. I don't know what the baby's name is in the movie, but in real life it was a son named Ryan. It shows that he got a security job. In real life it was a hardware store. I'm guessing it's a department store in this because it shows him, when he comes home, he's got all kinds of jewelry and different stuff that he's stolen. And then it shows him bringing these two young women to his house, which is where he kills them. A lot of times it'll fade to black and then cut to them being dumped somewhere. Some scenes go further than others with the rape and the torture, but for the most part it kind of just cuts. But it's done just enough so you get the idea, and actually, in a way, the way it's done, the way it fades to black, it is more effective because it can make your mind sort of imagine what's going on, instead of just being so exploitative and just showing you. Because really, the only people that know that what happened would be the killer and the victim. Turns out these two women, it became known that Bianchi had offered them money to house sit for them, so that linked Bianchi to them. They arrested him. Shows him being arrested. Then and this was also 6 months later. After, oh, no, that's later. So then it shows Angelo Buono being arrested, and it cuts out a lot. It cuts out, him turning on Angelo. It cuts out, all the different defenses that he tried, like having dissociative personalities or him being insane. It cuts through the whole trial, which one of the most expensive trials in Washington history. Well, Bianchi is in Washington. The crimes took place in of L.A. I do know he's in Washington because Bianchi is another one that I sent a letter to recently just to see if I could get a response. But yeah, he's in a Walla Walla. But one of the most expensive trials in California history. Earlier, I probably said Washington when I did the Cliff Notes. It's because I was thinking Bianchi serving in Washington. But no, it's correcting myself. California history. Of course, the OJ trial would surpass that. But nothing about the trial. I guess I kind of understand why it didn't show anything about Peter Lorre's daughter, which what happened was they went to go abduct her, then they realized, oh, this is Peter Lorre's daughter, and they thought it might be too high profile a victim, so that's when they stopped. It went and found someone else. It doesn't show when they abducted two girls, aged 12 and 14, probably for the better. They killed them both at the same time. In the lengthy trial, we just see them both being arrested. Then it cuts to 6 months later, where we see Bianchi getting a letter from this woman named Christine, which I don't know if this is true, but in the film, it was one of his patients of his bogus therapy sessions. And she has this obsession with, being a killer, writing a story. Well, I don't know if that's all true, but what is true is they conspired through letters of how for her to kill someone in a copycat manner to make Bianchi look innocent. It shows the attempt. It shows her picking up a prostitute, or a drug addict, going to strangle her, but then freeze frame, and then we get end text that says her name was Veronica Compton, saying that they conspired to do this copycat murder to make him look innocent, but she failed, and now she has a life sentence. And then it just says that Bianchi and Buono both got life sentences, and Buono died September 22nd of 2002 of natural causes. He actually died the 21st of a heart attack. I don't know if heart attack is natural causes, but... And that's the movie. So, I mean, yes, it leaves a lot out, but then again, it's hard to fit everything in an hour and a half. You would think a crime spree that only lasted 4 months, you could probably squeeze that in, but there's still a lot. The Peter Lorre thing, I guess I understand, you know, that is kind of high profile, but I was surprised that nothing about the trial or his insanity or anything like that wasn't shown. It does mention once in the scene with Lin Shaye where she chastises Angelo about raping young girls, including his own daughter, which she was really young. In real life, she was 5. That's the only nod or mention we get to his previous crimes, you know, pre-Hillside Strangler. So this movie really narrows itself down to just the Hillside Strangler. Like, yeah, it shows Bianchi's final double murder in Washington, but yeah, definitely focuses more on the murders, just really in those 4 months. Though I am glad it showed the Veronica Compton copycat thing because that is a major part of the story. But yeah, nothing about the investigation. So yeah, like I said, if you just want to see the killers doing their thing, like if this was your favorite Bundy movie because it was more of a slasher, then this is going to be more your true crime serial killer film. But it's also decently made. I would say it's probably better made. It's probably a better made film than, say, Ted Bundy or Ed Gein or Dahmer. It does feel more mature. It has a lot of gratuitous sex in it too, I should say. By mature, like, it doesn't feel like a TV movie. It does have some stylization to it. Very well acted, especially from the 2 leads, Howell and Turturro. Even though they play those parts well, look-wise, I do wonder what it would be like if they switched because they do look like the opposites. But I was actually very impressed by this film. I was expecting this to be another throwaway, why was this made? It essentially maybe a better version of an Uwe Lamel film, not that bad, but that's what I was expecting. And, you know, I got something on par with this. Which, I mean, great, it's not Netflix Dahmer or as good as some of the TV movies that I've done. But as far as, you know, like a movie, it probably is one of the better ones. Definitely one of the more accurate ones. Which, if you're only covering a 4-month span, that should be easy. So, yeah, this is the only one I have on Hillside Strangler. I don't have the Rampage movie. I did look for the TV movie. Maybe I'll see if it's on YouTube or something. But I do have a few more serial killer films to get to, so stay tuned for those, and thank you for watching.